Good morning and happy Thursday to each and every one of you. It is Thursday, right? I think so. I think it's Thursday. If it isn't, oh well, you know, maybe I just want to get to the weekend faster. But, it wouldn't be a day ending in Y in South Africa if there wasn't more unemployment and more nonsense happening in this country. I'm aware that the Matlanga Commission is underway. I've been keeping a close eye on it, although up until now, it's just been what we've already known, right? So I will make videos on as soon as we know anything more. Instead, we have to talk about another company. Up until now, we've had a number of companies restructuring as well as laying off a number of workers. ArcelorMittal was the last one. Now we also have Coca-Cola have just announced that they are currently undergoing a restructuring process that could see over 680 jobs cut. So they're going to be shutting down their plants in two places, I believe, Bloemfontein and East London. And, it doesn't sound like a lot, but 680 is a significant number, considering this is a country that already doesn't create anywhere near enough jobs. And then 680 very quickly turns into a couple of thousand when you also take the people that's reliant on these people, children, wives, maybe mothers and fathers. You very quickly start to see how this cascades into, and the big problem is that this economy already doesn't create enough jobs, right? So these 680 people can't just walk into another job. There is no more job. So when these 680 people lose their job, that's over. We are heading for an absolute disaster in this country. And we now have the Senate in the US also bringing their own bill of sanctions against the South African government, the ANC. We have increased pressure in the form of tariffs. Now, there is some good news on that front, just FYI. There are currently challenges in the Supreme Court against some of Donald Trump's tariffs. Donald Trump used an ordinance that was passed, I think, in the 40s or in the 60s or something, where it gives the president emergency powers to enact certain tariffs. And according to some, the tariffs may not be constitutional. And so what would happen is if the Supreme Court judges that some of the tariffs or maybe all of the tariffs aren't constitutional, they will have to go to the Congress and to the Senate in order to become law. They're probably going to do that, right? Just FYI, they will most likely do that because both the House and the Senate belongs to the Republicans. And so they would be able to get through the tariff or a deal that gives the president the right to enact tariffs or whatever the case may be. But there's maybe some good news on that front. Then there's a lot of bad news. Remember, South Africa is already losing its trading partner in the form of the US. If we then couple that with what's currently happening in Europe, now I know the socialists and the communists in our country increasingly think that their position is invincible. No one can touch them and they can basically act with impunity. But that position is becoming smaller and smaller. Your little platform is disappearing. You see, for the last 20 years, the socialist communist European Union was in full support of the socialist communist ANC in South Africa. And so money was just freely flowing from Europe into South Africa in spite of everything that the South African government was doing. But we're seeing a new wave of right-wing parties making massive inroads into the European Union and into the countries within the European Union. You have countries like Germany that for the first time ever, West Germany saw AfD, of course, is the Alternative for Deutschland, go from about 1% just 4 or 5 years ago to now 15% of the vote in West Germany. Germany has never voted for extreme, or not even extreme, because the AfD isn't even that extreme, but for more extreme right-wing parties. And now West Germany is going that way. We're seeing in the UK massive protests. The largest protest the UK has ever seen just happened over the weekend from Tommy Robinson and the right wing in Britain saying we have had enough of this nonsense. What does that mean for South Africa? In short, it's not good news. You see, because I believe Donald Trump ushered in a new era of economics, an era that says we will look to ourselves and look after ourselves first before we care at all about what the rest of the world is doing. That's exactly where America is now. And while a lot of people might look at America and say, well, look at their economy, it's struggling. This was always going to happen. I said this at the time. Tariffs will have a short term rough patch, but it should pay off in the long term. So the jury's still out on whether or not this would actually work. I can understand the theory as to why the tariffs may work. We'll see if it plays out in practice, right? That's just how it goes. The fact of the matter is, America is looking to itself. It wants to bring manufacturing back to America. It wants to get as little as it can from the rest of the world and instead just focus on its own stuff. Every other country in the world is going to follow suit. You have in China, for example, Chinese economists are now warning that the miracle of the Chinese economy is coming to an end. Now, when people hear, oh, China's going to collapse, I hate using that word even because countries don't really collapse, right? A country, I guess you could say a country collapses if it goes into civil war, but that's not really how countries collapse. What happens to countries is just that the economy slows to a crawl, and in a country like China, where everything, all of the oppression that the Chinese experience at the hands of the CCP, all comes at the promise that, yes, we oppress you, but we deliver growth, we deliver luxury, we deliver wealth. If this ends, the wealth and the luxury and the prosperity end, the Chinese government, the CCP, will come under immense pressure from within their own country, and eventually the Chinese people will demand a new government and will probably overthrow the CCP. This is sort of the whole secret. And according to many Chinese economists, China is looking at a massive slowdown. The big problem for China right now is that they're on the verge of entering what is known as a deflationary spiral. So what happens is, because they have so many factories that basically produced exclusively for America, once the goods became so expensive in America that it no longer really makes sense, it's no longer cheap and easy to buy Chinese goods, you now have the Chinese people benefiting from this in the short term. They're able to buy all of these incredible goods for almost nothing because the supply is way more than what the demand is, and most producers will at least sell for something rather than just take 100% of the loss. Well, that's called a deflationary bubble, because what ends up happening is inflation is the weakening of your currency. So you would think deflation is the strengthening of your currency, but that's not really what it is. In theory, yes, maybe, but in practice, this is deflation simply means that the value of the good has collapsed. So not the value of the currency has gone up, because the value of the currency is still the same the world over. No one wants Chinese yuan more or less. It's still the same currency. The only thing that's happened now is that the value of the goods have collapsed just because you have an oversupply. And once this happens, it's usually very hard to put that little genie back in the bottle, and you'll just see factories close down, people lose their jobs. There's already a massive problem with youth unemployment in China, which is probably going to get worse. So the point I'm trying to make here is South Africa will very quickly find itself without allies, without friends in this world, with Europe basically will now be forced. Germany just announced 175,000 jobs were lost. Just in the last quarter alone, they have massive problems with some of their own factories now closing down, and a lot of their factories are going to go open up in America because they want access to the American market. But while Europe is a very rich continent, its economy is completely stagnant. There's nothing happening in that economy. And of course, it is socialism and communism that has destroyed, at least I should say, socialist and communist thinking that has destroyed the European economy, that has made it so that it can no longer really compete with anyone else in the world. That means the money is drying up. Europe will very quickly, they should technically be opening up their markets and allowing more people to play in the markets. They're not going to do that. They're going to look inwards and they're going to try and fix the problem within. And that means that they're going to shut the door to anyone else. And then you have China struggling. the Russian economy is projected to collapse within the next year and a half, because, well, if the Chinese economy goes, the Russian economy goes along with it. Because right now, the only thing that's keeping the Russian economy going is the fact that China is buying all of its oil and gas. But if the Chinese economy were to collapse, China would have no need to buy oil and gas from Russia. And so Russia would collapse alongside it. This is the problem when you get into trade with warmongers and communist countries. But that is where we are right now. Just more jobs lost in South Africa and a world that really doesn't seem to be friendly to us. If you like my content and you like the content that I make and you think more people should have access to it, please consider hitting the like button, hitting that subscribe button, and smashing the bell, because it really does help. As always, massive shout out and thank you to all of the patrons and the YouTube channel members. Thanks to your support, I'm able to do what I do here, and hopefully I can grow this into something even bigger. The plan is to eventually get researchers that can go and find the stories, so that I don't have to rely on people like the SABC or people like News 24, but that we can go out and find the stories ourselves that matter and that you need to know about. So, yeah, if you want to be part of that, please consider supporting, and then just be good to each other, be kind to each other, and I will see all of you in the next one. Peace.